Oh, I know. Call to order the regular bi-monthly meeting of Colorado Water Conservation Board. So we are in order and ready for business. I'd like to start with Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll ask our host director, Ed Gallagher, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Just for the record, I'm Russell George, chairman of the Colorado Water Conservation Board. Our first item of business is board appointment of a new director, and I'll ask the Attorney General, Pat Kowalski, to undertake the swearing in. Well, that's a 6-minute speech for you then, Pat, if you like. Congratulations, Jim. Thank you. So, Jim, while you're signing the official paperwork, let me, on behalf of all of the other directors, welcome to the Water Conservation Board. You're known to a number of us. We're glad to have you. I'll give you a chance later to speak up if you like. I won't expect you to do it right now. You've got some business, but when you're ready, we're going to give you a chance to go ahead and sign that and you can get that done. So while that's happening, before we move to the next item, which is amendments and review and approval of the agenda, I want to introduce again our host director, Director Gallagher. We are in Steamboat Springs, which is in the white Yampa green basin, and give you a chance if you'd like to say something.
Far down below us.
Jeez.
hence we have over 100 springs in the area here. Some of them hot, some of them cold, but each one an individual spring. We have a nest of them right outside our door here, and we have the Epinema Steamboat Springs right across here, down the hogback on just where the railroad went through, and no longer chugs anymore because of the railroad coming through it. But it is a special location. The Indians used to gather here in this meadow. This park that we have out here, Little Toots Park, was probably the first park in Colorado. This town being on a major U.S. Highway route, this became a location where people could stop and camp, and eventually they needed some kind of facility, and they ended up with this community house that was moved here in 1930, that was built originally in 1921, which is out in the park, which became a shelter for early motorists in the early 20s. The library here has a legacy. The actual library was actually founded in the 1880s from a collection of books from an immigrant here whose family, after his death here from tuberculosis, ended up donating his books and many of his family books to form the first library here. The library was actually moved out of town and rebuilt and built in this location here, in this structure we're meeting in right here. This was a two-story structure. And in 2009, the new modern library was added next door. It was in the 1890s and is today a meeting place of this community. And I think it's a very wise choice that we have this meeting here today, because it really talks about our water community, both statewide as well as our local water community. We have many meetings in here talking about water, but many other civic issues. So it is right that we are meeting here today. And I hope that you will have time to, when you go downstairs, take a left and go into the library itself and see the wonderful space it is, that it looks out onto the river and all the iconic springs and the hogback that we have here and the river itself, and understand that this is a special place and is dear to our hearts. So with that, I yield back to you.
Thank you, Director Gallagher. That's a nice way to start us. History is always a good foundation to stand on, and thank you for doing that for us. And I will take the tour. I appreciated just what I saw coming in so far this morning, the mural here and the photo display and the story about Bud Werner. And so let's take advantage while we're here in this beautiful place. Next item on the agenda is review and approve the agenda. And I will make a couple announcements. The microphone now is working, I think. I'm not sure how much the system picked up of what I said at the beginning, but just as a reminder to all of us, we record the meeting because we're a public body, but it's also being broadcast live on the internet. I assume we're doing that this morning. So as you're thinking about what color of humor you're interested in talking about, just remember that it isn't just the people you can see who will appreciate your humor. So, review and approve the agenda. I am aware of a couple things, and then if you would each help me with anything else. This afternoon, between item 14 and item 15, we will set aside 5 minutes for a public presentation. Do we have a subject matter for that we can put in the notes here of what they want to talk about?
Her name is Abby Burke from the Western Rivers Program, and she will be presenting on Colorado water plan engagement and NGO support for the criteria for agenda item 15.
That's just an addition that will fit in there. Other changes that we know of today. Director Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move item 16H up to the head of that agenda item. That is the steamboat, Steamboat's Yampa River Management Plan item under the grants request. The proponent is going to be busy setting up the barbecue that we're going to have after we adjourn or recess this afternoon. So she is requested to have a little additional time to be able to do that. This is a hands-on kind of place. So if that would be
That's a good enough excuse to move.
Otherwise, you'll have to wait.
Will be at the head of the list on 16, and please remind me, I've made a note, but when we get there, if I forget, please remind me, and we'll certainly do that.
I sure
Any
will.
other amendments or changes to the agenda other than what we have printed in our materials? Okay, is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Second.
Moved by Director Yon and seconded by Director Hamel to approve the agenda as amended. Is there discussion? None appearing. All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. The agenda is approved. Next item, review and approve May 18 through 19, 2016 board meeting minutes. And as you know, those are filed under tab 3. Are there any amendments? I'm going to ask if we can turn this projector off, even though I'm not in it. It's in my eye. And it may be as close as I ever get to blue eyes, but is the hue good? Well, leave the halo. The only chance we'll ever see it. Any amendments, corrections, changes to the minutes of May 18, 19? None appearing. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of May 18, 19 as printed? Director Wattenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would approve the board meeting minutes of May 18th and 19th.
Is there a second?
Chairman, I second that motion.
Seconded by Director Smith. Is there any discussion on the motion? None appearing. We're ready for the vote. All in favor of the motion, which is to approve as written the filed minutes of the board CWCB board meeting of May 18, 19. All in favor, please say aye. All opposed, no. Motion carries. Next item, approve and/or remove consent agenda items, tab 4. Is there anything that anyone would like to change on the consent agenda? Okay, then the chair will entertain a motion to approve all consent agenda items as submitted in agenda item 4.
So moved, Mr.
A motion has been made by Director Gallagher to approve consent agenda. Is there a second? Seconded by Director Montgomery. Is there discussion? None appearing. We're ready for the vote. All in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda items, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Now let's see. We've accomplished all of that in about half the time. Let's keep this going. Next item, agenda 5, proposed board meeting dates in 2017. Are there any changes from what we've had before? Director Eckler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we have discussed with Director Wattenberg the difficulty of the North Platte entertaining us in March, or at least the unpredictability of going up there in March. So we needed to chat about the other board meeting locations and dates to see if any of the other basins might be willing to swap with the North Platte, with the exception, of course, of the meetings that are tied to the Water Congress in November. And in January. The 2017 meetings, I think we have some flexibility if there's a director who wants to volunteer at their more temperate basin for the March meeting.
Director Wattenberg?
Thank you, and I certainly don't want to create any hardships here. If it is actually maybe easier to, we can opt out to go to either 2018 or 2019 too. I mean, it just may be a little simpler than trying to come to Walden in March. We don't have a lot going on in March, so that may be somewhat of a problem. Thank you.
Director Eklund?
Mr. Chairman, I'd suggest that we take this under advisement. Director Yon, if you want to entertain the possibility of, I don't know if you've thought about locations in the South Platte Basin that you'd recommend yet, but if you want to kind of think about that in September, maybe September would be better in the North Platte. Director Wattenberg and we would be able to do the March meeting in the South Platte.
I was going to mention that. I don't know. I haven't checked into that kind of thing yet, but I think we could probably do that. We do get some rough weather in March sometimes, but
fair enough.
Maybe a little more temperate than North Platte. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we have the makings of a possibility. Let's defer then to administrative action. Director Eklund, why don't you follow up with both of the directors? And if it can be adjusted that way, that's fine. Bring it back in 2 months for final approval, but chances are that's a good solution. Other dates then, for now, will remain as printed. Next item, Agenda 6, future board meetings in 2016. Next month or next meeting, September 2022. Beaver Creek, and then followed in November 16, 17 in Denver. Those are firm. So that's that. We're ready for director's reports. According to the agenda, we can turn to our fully anointed director. Congratulations and welcome to your first meeting in full capacity.
Great, thank you.
Oh, you want a microphone?
I'll steal it from, if that's okay. Good morning, and thank you for the introduction. I was joking that since our last meeting, they changed my title from interim director to actual director. That's the big change. Yeah, actual. So thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you, Director Gallagher, for hosting us here in Steamboat. It's great to be here in Route County. I'm going to touch on just a few things and happy to take any questions on these or other matters. So first, here we are in July, and this is a time that presents some seasonal challenges at the department. And I don't want to steal Northwest Region Manager Velarde's thunder here, but some of the things that we deal with are the human-wildlife conflicts with the young boy that encountered a mountain lion in his yard in the Roaring Fork Valley just a month or so ago. He's doing well, I understand. And bear conflicts too, as they come into town, and that of course creates issues that our Colorado Parks and Wildlife folks need to deal with. It's also a time of wildfires. And while at the department, we don't have a formal role in firefighting, we do have commissioned officers who assist local emergency responders and public safety folks with road closures, evacuations, and other things. So I just want to recognize and thank Parks and Wildlife for their efforts on that. I'm really proud to be able to contribute those resources when those kind of events come up. So thank you. It's also a time of year when we engage in a lot of planning at the department. We are in the process of vetting legislative proposals for next year. We propose those up through the governor's office. And also budget decision items. So this is a busy time at the department in planning for the next year. On program work, just a couple of things. Number one, we have a unique legal development resulting from the Gold King release last August down in the Animas, in which the state of Colorado has been sued by the state of New Mexico. That is unique, both because states don't sue each other very often, and also because it The petition to file a complaint is an original action in the U.S. Supreme Court. And so this, again, is unique, and it's something that we're dealing with at DNR and also through the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, working with the AG's office and the Governor's Council's office. So there's that development. We are also working hard on Colorado the Beautiful and implementing that. This was an effort announced by the governor in his State of the State speech last year, with a vision of within a generation, every Coloradan lives within 10 minutes of a park, a trail, or an open space. Here in Steamboat Springs, we have the lovely Yampa River Trail, which certainly contributes to that. That's a project that's enjoyed funding from GOCO and others. And we just want to really foster that conversation for recreation in the outdoors. Finally, I'll touch just quickly on severance tax. It's a topic that I imagine we'll discuss some later in the day. The Joint Budget Committee held a hearing on June 20th and got an update from the Department of Revenue, who at that time had not gotten the number or the volume of amended tax returns that we were all sort of anticipating might start flowing in as a result of the BP decision we discussed down in Del Norte. And so the Joint Budget Committee elected not to release any of the funds that were restricted via Senate Bill 218. That is, that continues to be workable from the department's perspective. Many of the funds in the operational account have fund balances, and we can get through the next year. The Joint Budget Committee will likely have another hearing in August, where again, Revenue will report on what kind of amended returns they're seeing and what kind of liability the state might have for tax refunds. Then finally, maybe I'll touch on oil and gas a little bit. So I came here directly from Glenwood Springs. There was an Oil and Gas Conservation Commission hearing there yesterday. And I just want to provide some statistics. I was moved by them. They were more dramatic than I thought in portraying the downturn in oil and gas activity, which, again, results in less severance tax, less mill levy coming to the department and to the state. So first is I'm going to give you three statistics. So first is the number of oil and gas rigs operating in the state of Colorado. As of June of this year, there were 16 oil and gas rigs. In the same period last year, there were 38. And in the same period the year before, there were 67. So over the course of 2 years, we've gone from 67 operating oil and gas rigs to 16. As far as well starts go, I'll do this in the reverse. There were 2,200 well starts in 2014. That dropped to 1,456 well starts the next year. This year, we're on track to see about 800. So a 300% reduction there. We are, though, seeing operators continue to apply for drilling permits. These are permits that are good for 2 years, so they are banking on the opportunity to drill more in the future. This year, we're on track to see about 3,100 applications for permits to drill coming in the door. And I'll just compare that with 2014, and that was 4,200. So there's a reduction there, but a still robust interest in drilling new wells in the state of Colorado. So again, those are just statistics that really, for me, put into context what we're all reading about and seeing otherwise. So maybe finally, I'll end just by saying it is a privilege to be here in my capacity as executive director. I want to assure board members and members of the public that are here, I fully intend to continue along the track that probably started over a decade ago with Director George at the helm, of active engagement with stakeholders, being responsive to concerns and addressing those responsibly, providing adequate resources for our agencies to meet the public's expectations for what we all do. So again, just really happy to be here. Thanks for the time.
Great. Questions for Director Randall or comments? The only observation I would make is that I suspect these numbers that you're showing for what's happening in oil and gas in Colorado could be repeated nationally. Yep. I think that's how serious this one is. But thank you for those numbers. Yep. The numbers don't lie in this case about how serious this is. Okay, next, IBCC Director, Director Stoll.
Good morning. I don't think my mic's working places. A couple of things I was just reminded as Director Randall gave his report about oil and gas situation. I just returned from the Western States Water Council in Bismarck, and pretty universal in the West, oil and gas issues and the revenue and how much water resources in the West rely on those income streams. And North Dakota, as well as some other, you don't have, there it is, very good. North Dakota also, their other primary industry is agriculture, and we're seeing, you know, certainly a lot of stress in the agriculture economy nationwide right now, with prices being less than half of what they were just 4 or 5 years ago on many of the commodities. But it's cyclic, and most people are eternal optimists that it will come back around to some degree or not. The IBCC's next meeting has been scheduled for the 17th of August, and the agenda will include, you know, talking about water plan financing and revenue streams, as well as probably the criteria and guidelines on the water supply reserve account monies, and continue the discussion that was brought up last time on kind of a 5-year plan coming out of DNR on how what we might be able to plan on financing water plan going forward. We're also starting the work for the November 29th meeting in conjunction with the CAWA, Colorado Agriculture Water Alliance Group on ag viability. It's kind of, I think, been interesting that many people have hit the ground running since the water plan has been produced. We have a number of groups around the state that are taking on the topic of alternative transfer methods, ATMs. A group's being put together by the CWCB group to talk about ATMs. The DARCA, the Ditch and Reservoir Canal Company Association, has already had a series of workshops. The CAWA group are in the middle of having had several workshops statewide, most recently the 13th out in Morgan County. And so the idea at the November 29th meeting will to bring kind of a report back to the IBCC and the CAWA on what's being accomplished and what are some of the summaries of these different activities are going on around ATMs. And so I also wanted to, while I had the table, give a heads up to a piece of legislation that was passed last year. It was House Bill 1256, and this was concerning the South Platte storage study. And it was a fairly short timeline, but the staff and the roundtables have, I think, been meeting those deadlines very ably. In June, the Metro and the South Platte roundtables gave tentative approval to the concept of the study. And then during July, the staff at the Conservation Board and the Division of Water Resources has been working out a kind of a draft scope of work that will be shared back with the roundtables and their respective committees, as well as the South Platte Groundwater Technical Committee. And the goal is to have a fairly well-vetted product for this board at your next meeting in September. And prior to that, they hope to have at least a draft so that those people who might want to apply to the RFP might have an idea of what the expectation and the scope of the work is. But it'll all be contingent upon the final action of this board in September. And so shortly after that, it'll officially be distributed, and hopefully by end of October or into September, October period, there'll be a process, and again, there'll be a selection committee of staff and roundtable folks to pick a contractor, and then that study will start with the deadline by the legislation for the one-year study to be completed by the end of October of 17, with a report to the legislature by the end of calendar year 17. So pretty ambitious study or schedule, but it seems like everybody's on point and meeting those deadlines. And so you can expect in your packet for the next meeting kind of the draft recommendation that you'll be getting at the board meeting. And so pay attention to that. Hopefully we'll come out with a consensus document that can be put on the street right away. Any questions for me?
Okay, I don't see any. Thank you, Director Stolt. I don't think we have anyone from Department of Agriculture this morning. So let's move to CWCB Director, Director Eklund.
I think your reminder that we are live streamed was directed at me this morning, so I'll try and keep it as clean as I can. Sometimes the local papers, when we have these meetings, we meet every other month. If you're new to our meetings, if you're from the Steamboat community here, and when we meet, oftentimes the local papers will scoop the national media, and it's happened here again in Steamboat. So I think I am ready if Allison's ready. Awesome. All right, is it warming up, Heinz?
No, it's too bright.
Oh, it's just too bright. Okay, gotcha. All right. So, for example, this headline, appearance of angry Pokemon in director's room last night, an ominous sign for board meeting. That's disturbing, although probably not as disturbing as how the Steamboat pilot got a hold of this news. I'll go to the next one here. Wildfires force Colorado to airlift Rocky Mountains to safety. This is a little update. This board is no stranger to our wildfire season. Last year, we kind of dodged the bullet, so to speak, but this year, we've got, as you all know, continued drought, although it's much less severe than it has been in years past. 5% of the state is abnormally dry. That said, the Yampa White and North Platte are they're finishing July right now at 50% of average precipitation. So always the time of year that you watch the sky for precipitation and what it's going to do to our hydrology for the rest of the year. The Hayden Pass, we got two fires burning, big fires burning actively. Hayden Pass, south of Salida, 16,000 acres, 45% containment as of this morning. And then that's been burning since July 8th. And then the Beaver Creek fire north of Walden in Director Wattenberg's backyard, and that's 24,000 acres, 24,500 acres. And that's only 5% containment as of today. So that one's been burning since June 19th, and I know everyone's kind of keeping an eye on that. So this one is our finance stuff. This headline reads, BP executives still trying to find something cool to spend new severance tax money on. We're at a critical time in water funding and financing and kind of figuring out what the road ahead looks like. As the water plan describes, we are $20 billion away from 2050 and the state of water play that we want to be in when we reach 2050. And so we've got to figure out how we're going to marshal those assets and make sure that we're providing the state that we all define in the water plan. Director Stolt mentioned the work that the Basin Roundtables are doing. You've obviously got the WSRF challenges and that process in front of this board, and they have the Basin Roundtables have a friend in this board as we're looking at ways to move forward with what they do. That is very important work to the state. We continue to ready our fiscal ship for the next iceberg, or whatever the analogy is, and the finance committee meeting that we have every year in September will this year take on added importance, and we're looking forward to the chat that we'll have in Beaver Creek, and we're also going to be chatting today later this afternoon about that. I'll move into some of the stuff that we do. The water efficiency grants, we received and approved about $120,000 worth of programs located in Pueblo, St. Charles Mesa, and Aspen, and for tap fee workshops to help providers better understand tap fees. And so that's ongoing. Water efficiency plans, we gave conditional approval to quite a few of those, to Skyland Metro District, Mount Crested Butte, and Southeast Colorado Water Conservancy District for doing a supplemental regional plan. And then we've got one under review for the Parker Water and Sanitation Board. The last thing I'll mention on that is the Stream Restoration Grant Program, and this is all in my director's report, but wanted to highlight these. $2.5 million has been allocated to 20 projects in the 2013 flooding areas. So Chris Sturm and Kevin Hauk, their work continues, and we get frequent updates from them on how that's going with respect to NRCS and all the different moving pieces that are going on in the local communities that were hit hard by the flooding. All right, this one's from like last night. So Clinton and Trump agree that water and whiskey's for fighting. So it's all for fighting. Hazard mapping work is ongoing. I don't know why this makes me think of hazard mapping, but it does. Stephanie DiBattito has been doing great work on this, and you should visit the link in the report that takes you to the mapping, and it uses our DSS map viewer technology, and it's pretty slick, so you should check it out. That again is in the report. Floodplain rules and regulations of the 251 communities in the National Flood Insurance Program, only 16 are still outstanding regarding documentation adopting the rules. So Stephanie will be in touch with you if one of those 16 is in your jurisdiction or your basin, but that's really good news. That's the good news. On the bad news side, on the community rating system, only 46 of those 251 communities. Again, Stephanie will be in touch if you could maybe be of assistance in reaching out to some of your colleagues in your basin on that. Okay, so this is news on the water plant supply, and on the consumptive side, Governor endorses Moffett firming project and the DQ Orange Julius merger, oddly enough. So that's actually that's one you find here in Steamboat. You can visit that. The boatload of recently decreed in-stream flow rights in divisions 4, 5, and 6 that you can find again in the director's report indicate how much hard work that Linda and her team are up to these days, and really appreciate the efforts that they have undertaken to again move us as a state in the direction we need to head. Okay, this is to Director Randall's point about New Mexico. So this is what happens when you sue us. Hickenlooper announces that First Act as VP will be to merge Texas and New Mexico. So they can sort out their Rio Grande problems on their own down there. But while we're in the Rio Grande there, Director Smith, the forecasting that Joe Busto has been working on is really impressive stuff. It includes he included a great update in the report on the progress being made there to better forecast, make weather prediction and forecasting available to the producers in the valley. And we're really proud of the work he's doing, and read about that in the report as well. All right, new report finds climate change caused by 7 billion key individuals. This is climate plan implementation. Taryn Fennessy, you all know and love, she is working extremely hard and is working with state agencies to hold stakeholder meetings, and Director Randall and his team in EDO, they're scheduled stakeholder meetings with materials management in June. That already happened. And then this month with CDOT, Director George. So the conversation around the state agencies is ongoing, and that's critical. We've really got to deal with this and need a Colorado climate plan to do so, and leave the politics and the lawsuits and the fighting about this to Washington. And we'll just do our work here. And Taryn's leading the effort. So not just within the CWCB or DNR, but across the state. And we're really proud of her work there. This one is Western governors demand to know which stars on U.S. flag belong to them. That's a weird way of teeing up the introduction of Carly Brown. Wave your hand back there, Carly. Carly Brown is new to our office from, she worked for the Western Governors Association for many years, knows federal and interstate water, knows the relationships that we have on rivers like the Colorado and the players in other rivers, the Arkansas, the South Platte, the Rio Grande. So we are fortunate to bring her on board as our new section chief for federal and interstate work, and look forward to working with her moving forward here. A little bit of sad news. This one is a CWCB staffer to spread Brent's Biggins locations throughout Gulf states. And I question whether or not that's a good business decision, but and Heinz says it's not. But nonetheless, I think this is it's a sad way of saying that Brent is going to be moving on. This is his last board meeting with us. Unless we can convince the Gulf states that he really does need to stay here. They do have tough problems down there to tackle, and we're going to be sad to lose him. His bedside manner, so to speak, with the Basin Roundtables has been impeccable. And I can't underscore how much utility you've been to this board, Brent, and the work we've done on the water plan, the basin implementation plans, and everything else. So please, if you wouldn't mind, join me in giving him a round of applause for his service. All right. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm done, and I think we can get the glare out of your eyes here.
All right, thank you. Any, are we off completely? Heinz, are we
still?
This one isn't on either.
Start talking, I think it'll.
Okay, we'll keep trying. Well, we're going to go ahead anyway. I don't know what all's being transmitted, but we can at least hear in the room, and I think now we're up. Okay, good. Okay, so next, let's turn to State Engineer's Office. Dick Wolf sent me a note that he had some obligations, I think, in Rio Grande, was it? San Luis Valley, that he really needed to be doing today. So he sent his best wishes and regrets, so that that's why he's not here. And it's time for Division of Parks and Wildlife, and I'm very pleased to introduce a friend of mine and to many of us to present the report for CPW, Northwest Regional Manager Ron Velarde.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do appreciate Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I do appreciate the opportunity to be here. This is the first time over here, and obviously I'm representing Director Broscheid, who is out of town, and he asked me to be here. I did have a lot more stuff than I think I should present, but I'll probably cut it real short, especially after following that presentation. Whatever I give you is mundane compared to that. So I do, Executive Director Randall did steal quite a bit of my thunder, but that's all right because he's the boss, so he can do it. But I will cover a little bit about that. But I did want to talk about initially some sad news for the people that knew Eddie Coachman. Eddie Coachman used to be our aquatic manager, had a lot to do with the Colorado Water Conservation Board. I know Dwayne Hilton and other individuals, Dave Robbins with the in-stream flow, and he passed away last month in South Park, probably doing what he liked the most, and he was up at his cabin at South Park. So I did want to say that because Eddie Coachman was instrumental in a lot of different things within the former game fishing parks, actually game fishing parks, Colorado Division of Wildlife, and so I just wanted to pass that on for people that didn't know that he had passed on. Just some of the other things, and Director Smith is obviously well aware of it, but Beaver Park Dam received a couple awards from the Association of State Dam Safety Officials. And I thought that was unique, and because I know that this board had a lot to do with Beaver Park, and I know Director Smith had a lot to do with Beaver Park, but they gave an award to the Colorado Parks and Wildlife for the National Rehabilitation Project of the Year award. And then they also gave an award to Mr. John Clark, who was our engineer that was in charge of that. So I thought that was worth mentioning to the group. Also, and I'm sure Director Smith is well aware, they're in the process. They'll start August the 1st fixing a depression. I'm not sure what a depression is, but I guarantee you know a lot more about it than I do. And I think it's going to take 6 or 8 weeks to finish that. Do you want to talk about, I'll mention that Barb Horn, who is our River Watch Coordinator, she's still with us and she still lives in Durango, but they've changed her and she now works for Water Resources. And what's important about that is that we are in the process of adding a water specialist to the Southwest region. As you know, Dave Graff, who I know works close with your group, has been doing the work for the Southwest and the Northwest, well, actually since about 2002 or 2003. And so we're finally got a position, and it's not a new position. We took an old position, and Jay knows a lot more about it than I do where they got it, but we're going to be having a water specialist in the Southwest, which will really help the Dolores and the Gunnison and obviously the San Luis Valley. So that's good news. I wanted to be sure and say that. Obviously, we've been working close with the Water Conservation Board, with the in-stream flow, a lot of different projects, fishery habitat enhancement, flow management, access, water-based recreation, and we do appreciate that from a Colorado Parks and Wildlife perspective, which leads into the next one, and that's with Steamboat Lake. And everybody knows, and Steamboat Lake is upriver from the Elk River. It's pretty important to not only the upper Yampa, but also to the city of Steamboat Springs. So we're working, our water resource people from our agency is working with the water resource, the state water resource people, and working with trying to look at just this whole issue with water administration, augmentation, future water developments, and we're working close with them, and I think we're getting close to coming to some fruition. But it's going to be interesting to see. We're also working with Public Service. As you know, they own 5,000 acre feet at Steamboat Lake. So it's important that we work all together collaboratively to see if we can come up with a solution that fits all of our needs, and that's really important. Do want to mention, because it's the big river fish and the endangered fish thing, which is in the Northwest region is a big deal, and I'm sure in the Southwest it is too, but in the Northwest with the Yampa River and the White River, and we've been trying to deal with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the endangered species people because we want to protect all of our water development for the future. And so we've had a couple fishing tournaments. The fishing tournament at Ridgeway was successful. We've done it 2 years and trying to take out non-native fish, and we're using our sportsmen to try to tackle that problem. And we think it has been pretty successful. We're going to continue with that tournament, and it's mostly regarding smallmouth bass and northern pike. We had a fishing tournament at Elkhead Reservoir, not as successful. And we've had quite a bit of disagreement about how we manage for non-native fish, especially in the Yampa, mostly in the Craig area. And we're going to try it. We're going to continue trying to do it. We are going to put up a fish net thanks to a lot of cooperative spirit from a lot of different people. But hopefully that will eliminate not having to drain Elkhead and Darris, the watershed. So that's what our goal is. Just looking at some other issues that are out there, and as you well know, financial sustainability has been an issue with the Colorado Parks and Wildlife. And I don't want to say since the merger, because the merger had nothing to do with it. This has been ongoing. The wildlife side of the Colorado Parks and Wildlife is, we've cut $40 million from our budget and over 50 FTE. And so we're in the process. Our director, Broscheid, has instructed us. We're having these meetings, financial sustainability meetings throughout the state of Colorado. We're going to have 5 in Northwest region. We're going to have them all over the state of Colorado for our sportsmen and sportswomen, as far as what our problem is, why we're at where we're at, and what we're going to need in the future. And it's obviously on the wildlife side, we do need to get approval, not only from the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Board, but more importantly, from the legislature. And that's critical. So that's what we're aiming to do is go to our sportsmen and sportswomen and say, this is what we need, this is why we need it, and we do need their support. Now on the parks side, the parks prior to the merger, they do not have to get approval from the legislature to increase their license fees, but that does sunset in 2017. And so we're looking at, and on the park side, they're not as financially stable as we had thought originally. So we're looking at what we can do for the park side. So those are things that we're working on that are a really big deal for the Colorado Parks and Wildlife and for the future for all the programs that we presently have. And if we don't succeed, we've already cut programs on the wildlife side. It's going to be interesting to see what we do in the future. So not a downer, just the fact that we have to deal with. And I know that Executive Director Randall and Director Broscheid are working hard on it, along with Gaspar Perricone, and see if we come up with a solution that will satisfy our sportsmen. Do you want to talk about the greater sage grouse? That is a big deal in Northwest Colorado. And the reason it's a big deal, as you're well aware, is the Gunnison sage grouse was put on the threatened list by the Fish and Wildlife Service. So essentially it's taken our agency out of the management of the Gunnison sage grouse, which is not a good thing, right? I mean, we all agree with that. It's shortcut and took the counties out of it, took the landowners out of managing the Gunnison sage grouse, and it took us as an agency. So in the Northwest region, we're working hard. We've got 5 years because the Fish and Wildlife Service did not put the greater sage grouse and list it, but they gave us 5 years to solve the problem if there is a problem. So we've got 4 years left. So it's incumbent upon landowners, energy industry, counties, and the Colorado Parks and Wildlife to make sure it doesn't happen. And I know we're taking it serious. I know that certain landowners and energy companies are, because they're going to implement the habitat exchange that has been probably at least 4 or 5 years in the making, and hopefully that we're going to get that going. So just a couple other things in the as far as management within the Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I think a lot of you know Steve Yamashita. Steve Yamashita was the Northeast Regional Manager. He had retired on June 30th, and he has been replaced by a gentleman by the name of Mark Leslie. And Mark Leslie was a area wildlife manager in Fort Collins, and then just recently was the Deputy Regional Manager out of the Northeast region, and he is now the Regional Manager for the Northeast region. And let's see what else. Trying to think if there's anything else that we ought to be that would be of interest to you. I think that's about it, unless you have some questions.
Director Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ron, thanks for the great report. Welcome to the CWCB meeting. And thank you on behalf of the San Luis Valley on this water specialist position. Some of the things that have been practiced through the Rio Grande Cooperative Project that we've implemented. It's good for the irrigators. It's good for fish and wildlife. It's good for recreation on the upper Rio Grande. And you know the portfolio, the water portfolio that your agency owns in the San Luis Valley. And so this position will be very helpful. So thank you, and convey my thanks to Director Broscheid.
I will, Director Smith, thank you very much. And I do agree that this is a long time coming and it's important. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ron, very much. Good report. For Northwest Colorado, the wildlife and our water issues are paramount importance, and I appreciate your service over the years. Just remind me when Director Smith said something, I believe you started San Luis Valley, didn't you?
That's correct, Chairman. I was actually a rookie district wildlife manager and stationed in San Luis, the first officer that was ever stationed directly in San Luis. And I enjoyed my time in Costilla County, and then I was in Monte Vista for 5 years. So I was in the San Luis Valley for 8 years, and I love it. And I was also in Pueblo working with the gentleman to my right, who I have to say I enjoyed working with him. And thank you very much.
Nice bit of homecoming for all of us. Thank you. Water Resource and Power Development Authority, do we have a report? I hadn't seen anything.
It's in the board notebook.
Okay, that it always is. Mike's very good about that. So refer to the notebook for the report there. So that takes care of our director's reports. We are ahead a little bit, so I'm going to juggle the agenda just a little bit. We like to stay close to published agenda time because it's a public entity and the public relies somewhat on these times for their presentations. So I'm going to just let the next item sit for the moment, if that's all right, Pat, and then take the break. And then when we come back, we'll do items 8, 9, 10. So let's say it's now a little after 10:30. Normally we have 15 minutes. So let's be back here at about 10 till 11. Does that work?
And the food's coming for the break. It just hasn't arrived yet.
Well, that's too bad. It'll be here, I'm sure. We don't do without food. So
I wonder why they
10:50 we'll resume. We're in recess. Okay, I'll call the meeting back to order from recess. It's now about a little after 11, and we're ready for, geez, we're right on time then, Pat. Item number 8, Attorney General's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have in your materials the report from Susan Schneider and Karen Kwan, and we'd respond to any questions you might have on that. If you don't have any, I'm prepared to propose that you go into executive session with regard to items 9A through F.
And Director Wattenberg.
Mr. Chairman, could I propose that we amend the executive order list to include discussions of the Green Ditch Forest Service issues? If I could, please.
Okay, so you want to add an item G?
Item 18, I believe, Mr. Chairman, on the Attorney General's list there. And it would also become item G on the executive session list, if approved.
Okay, I'm lost. So you want to add an item G to executive session number 9?
Yes, please.
And what are you going to call it?
Green Ditch Forest Service issues.
Green Ditch.
Okay. There will be an added item G then, 9G, in the executive session. Is that it?
Thank you.
Okay, sure. Director Stahl?
Mr. Chairman, this isn't necessary for executive session, but at the Western States Water Conference, I was pleased to hear this as we did the state reports and reference to the Republican River situation, why both Kansas and Nebraska made complimentary remarks about how well the 3 states were starting to get along and resolve some of the issues out there. Maybe it's because we have a common concern with the Bureau of Reclamation over management of some of those reservoirs out there. But still, it was nice to hear that people are talking and rather than litigating.
That is always good news. Anything else? Otherwise, I think we'll leave the items on 8 for your own reading. And then we're ready for a motion to go into executive session.
And Mr. Chairman, I would indicate as your attorney that pursuant to the provisions of the revised statutes 246402-3A2, the items A through G are proper items for you to get the specific direction or to discuss specifically with your legal counsel, and it would be appropriate now to take a motion to go into executive session.
Thank you. Is there a motion to go into executive session? Director Wells. Is there a second? Director Smith, second. All in favor of the motion to go into executive session, please say aye. All opposed, no. Motion's carried. We will close or recess the regular meeting, and we will now go into executive session. We'll change the recording system according to law, and if you are not a member of CWCB board or staff, we'll have to excuse you for the duration of the executive session, which we assume will be, what, half hour, should we say? Yeah, so, and then we'll, as soon as we're finished executive session, if you're hanging around, we'll invite you all back in.